Welcome to Chronicles of Old Singapore. This is Dr Loh KS, and I speak to people about their memories of Singapore before it became a global city. Of course, Singapore is the Lion City and the Lion City of football. Football is something of great interest to many Singaporeans. It's part of its modern history, and Singapore is still very much crazy about football. And I've been trying to get someone to talk about football on Chronicles of Old Singapore. And I think I found no one better for today's podcast than Brian Richmond, the voice of football in Singapore. Hello, Brian. How
Choo.
are you?
Fine, thank you. Good
I
to speak with you, Kaseng.
yes. Very delighted to go through your football journey and your stories. When was it that you were first associated with football?
As young as in primary school, um, I was sport crazy, but not very talented, I must say. It was only in primary 5 and primary 6 that I got into football. Desperately wanted to play for school, but not good enough to be among the first 11. So I just practice, train hard to try and get into some form of a team, you know. And only in secondary 1 that I joined the football team again, and I played for the under 15, and that's where I started getting better and sort of worked my way into the school second team, and eventually ended up playing for the school's first team. And I'm talking about St. Patrick's School. I think there's a picture of that school team that I've provided you. And so it was all blood, sweat, and tears those days. But I was so crazy that it even affected my studies. You know, for me, it was sports comes first. And I got interested into other sports as well, primarily athletics, and concentrated on events like the 400, 800, and 400-meter hurdles. And I also played hockey for school. And eventually I played for the Singapore Combined Schools team uh, at soccer, hockey, and athletics.
Mm.
So as I went on to the higher levels of tertiary education, or should I say, into higher levels of education, I got better in sports. But again, my studies were affected, but I did enough to get through, the various stages of studies and what have you. Got through my secondary, the early secondary years, and then, of course, went through up to GCE O levels and managed to qualify. And eventually, what I did was I was picked to play for the Singapore Combined Schools and also for hockey and athletics. And in football, I did well enough to represent Singapore Combined Schools and the Singapore youth team, which is the under 20 team. I went for selection and I managed to get through, and I was picked to play for Singapore Combined Schools. And eventually, I was picked to also represent the Malaysian youth team. What happened was I played for Singapore in the Burnley Cup tournament, which is the equivalent of the youth team for Malaysia. And from there, I was picked to play for the Malaysian youth team.
Mm.
And we trained at the Merdeka Stadium in Kuala Lumpur. And so I made a name for myself there. And then what happened was in 1965, we left the Federation of Malaysia. And in 1966, we got back into competition for the Asian Championships. And that's where I played for Singapore in 1966 in the Asian Youth Championships. We didn't do too well. But the following year, in 1967, I captained the Singapore youth team, and we went on to do very well. We had a good bunch of boys who were very passionate about playing football for Singapore, representing Singapore and doing well. And we certainly, you know, we played ourselves to the ground, and we gave everything we had in the competition, and we ended up in fourth place. The first time ever that a Singapore team has ever got out of the group stages. And then what happened was we went on to the quarterfinals. That's where we met. The home country. Uh, that's Thailand, and we beat them. Surprise, surprise, surprise! Because they were one of the hot favorites. We beat them 1-0. And we played with our hearts. We played with so much passion. We gave our all, and we really did ourselves proud. And so we finished, went into the semifinals, and in the semifinals we lost to Myanmar, but we ended up in fourth position. So we really did Singapore proud, and you know, Singapore, welcome us back, especially the officials from the FAS. They welcome us back, and there was a lot of celebrations and what have you. And when we arrived in Singapore, I had my upgrading from a youth captain. I was captain of that team, by the way. We had what they did was they called on 3 of the Singapore youth players and told us that we have been promoted to the national side, and we are all going to be traveling with the national team to Indonesia, and this is on a goodwill tour. And we went on this goodwill tour to make up, in other words, to get together and be friends again because of the confrontasi. I don't know whether you remember the confrontasi.
Yeah.
Yes, and so we went on a goodwill tour all over Indonesia, and that was my upgrading into the national side. And then, of course, it was from 67, end of 67, into 68, 69, and 70, I played for the national team. A lot of people don't remember me turning
Yeah.
up for the national team because what happened was in 1968, there was a coach from Bulgaria, Lozan Koshev. He was appointed technical director. And when he came to Singapore, he learned about the various schemes and what have you. He learned about the Malaysia Cup and he frowned on it and he said, no, I don't think we should be taking part in a Malaysia Cup competition. This is basically domestic tournament. So he says we should pull out our national team from the Malaysia Cup and concentrate on international tournaments. All right, sounds good. But we lost a lot of following among local football fans. And because many years later, a lot of people that I have met because of my involvement with the national team and what have you, a lot of people I met asked me, hey, Brian, I don't remember you playing for Singapore. I said, yes, because all the tournaments that I took part in for Singapore happened overseas, happened in Indonesia, Vietnam, South Korea, in Laos, and especially Thailand and places like that. And we did not have a following that goes with us over to overseas tournaments and all that. But if you are in the Malaysia Cup, there would be a lot of following because a lot of these matches are played on home ground. and they'll be at the National Stadium to cheer you on. But unfortunately, in 1970, yes, in 1970, in my last tournament for Singapore, this was at the Indonesian uh, tournament. In fact, that was the tournament that Samad Alipiche, our future national captain, he got his blessings in this tournament in Indonesia. He was a reserve and he eventually came in because my other defender was injured and Samad came in as a replacement. And that was the beginning of his football career. So there you have it. And from then on, what happened? Well, there was one game in Singapore. This is a Division One game, and this is where let me see now, the police team. I was playing for the police team, and we played against the Royal Navy Wanderers in a Division One game, and I clashed with the opposing centre forward. I was playing last man. I clashed with the opposing centre forward. I fell. He fell on me, and I didn't realize I actually fractured my ankle, and it was bad. I couldn't walk. They had to carry me off the field. And I was stubborn in the sense that I never went to see a proper doctor. You know, for me, no doctors, either a Bomo or a sensei, Chinese sensei. Those were the days, really the early days when we trusted the Bomos and the sensei more than the Western doctors and all that. And I went on for about 3 months with that fractured ankle. And every time I run, when the swell goes down, and I decide to go and run and start getting back into shape, I find that it was very painful.
Oh.
So I decided one day to go along to Jalan Besar Stadium to have a look at the players' training and what have you. And then there was Mr. Tay. He was also one of the directors of the Tay Koyat Bus Company. He was vice president of the FAS, and he saw me and he asked me, he says, Brian, why aren't you back in training? So I told him what happened. And what he did was he got his driver, and together with him, we went into his car and he took me to hospital. He had me x-rayed, and it was discovered that it was a bad case of fracture. And that was the end of my football career, because I was already beginning to put on weight. And so even when I got better, uh, it was a bit, it was a bit heavy for me to carry myself around on the field. So that was when I decided, okay, I'll go into coaching, which I did. I took a course. I was one of 5+1 coaches. And then from there, I was offered to be the assistant national coach to Michael Walker. This was in 1971, 71, 72. I was offered the coaching job to assist Michael Walker, as well as take on the national youth team. And I took the national youth team in 1972 to Iran to take part in the Asian Youth Championships. And then I was, when I came back, we were all preparing the team, the Singapore team, to participate in let me see now, to participate in the SIAP Games held at the brand new National Stadium, which was the old National Stadium, but at that time it was just brand new. And it was the first time that Singapore was hosting the SIAP Games. But unfortunately, Singapore went bankrupt. So what happened was I was told by the FAS that unfortunately, Brian, FAS has gone bankrupt, and whatever we pay you whatever we pay the players, we can only pay you. We can't pay you your regular uh, fees, So I said, okay. Then I had a call from George Fabacho, executive producer from, at that time, RTS, Radio Television Singapore. So this was going to be the start of my broadcasting career, because when he asked me to be part of the team to cover the Siap Games in 1973, I said, okay, sure. Uh, I consulted my wife, first of all, to get her approval. And she said, yeah, take that, because you may not last in coaching. And so I said, true words were never spoken. So, which I did. I was assigned to two events, which is athletics and football. They both happen at the National Stadium. So why not? In the day, I'll be covering athletics, and then at 7:30, I'll stay on to cover football. And when we came back after the covering of these events, uh, good words were spread about me, involved as a commentator and what have you. And so they offered me a regular post as a commentator and presenter on television. So that's when my broadcasting career began. But before that, I must say that I was on radio from 1971. From 1971, I was on radio and fulfilling some of my dreams. And it all worked out for me. One thing led to another. And, before you know it, I was involved in this event and that event. And I was covering certain events, like, for example, the Talent Time on television. Then, of course, there were other events that happened where I was called on to host. And the rest is history.
Such a fantastic story. Yeah, I have so many questions to ask you.
Okay, sure.
So I guess in the beginning, when you were in primary school and falling in love with football, was that in the 50s, in the early 50s?
Yes, that's for sure. Yeah, that's primary school. I can't remember the year that I was in primary school, but it must be in 50 something,
Yeah.
Yes.
How does one, get to love football in those days? I mean, we don't have television at the time, right? There's no internet.
Or you must know this. We kids at that time, especially as you're growing up, not so much when you were in primary 3 or 4. It's when you are in primary 5 and you see your friends kicking about, on the field and running around, and you just want to be part of it. Not interested in studies, I will read as much as I can, but next thing I'll be looking out to see, is it time for me to go? Yes, time for me to get out. And moreover, I was very close to a lot of my friends in school because I was a boarder. I lived in the school. I grew up in the school from primary 3 right through to secondary 4. So you know what it is like, especially if you're a boarder, you tend to be a naughty boy. Yeah. But I was naughty in the sense that I was very active, very, very active, ever ready. I even, when I went to secondary school, I even, I even told the teacher in charge of physical education, uh, balls and what have you. And I said, "Sir, can I be in charge of the PE room?" He said, "Okay, sure, if you want to be." I had access. I went, "Oh, now it's the time for me to play." So I had access to all the balls and the rackets and what have you and all that. So I was king of the cupboard, and I have the choice of whatever. whatever sports, bats or so. It's my so if the boys want to play, they got to be very good to me. So I took advantage of that. I took advantage of that, and I practiced. I practiced my football. I used to kick against the wall, and until there's an old brother who lived in that block, and he used to wake up and yell and scream and say, "Stop! Get out! Get out!" And so that was me. If anybody is making noise, it must be old Brian Richmond, nobody else. So there you have it. So that's how I improve on my skills.
Right. A lot of people who don't get football would say, just 22 men chasing a ball, what's the big deal? Tell us, from your own experience, right? What is it that makes football so special for you?
You see it on TV every week, right? The English Premier League
Mm.
and what have you. Well, the thing about football is it's a game that is played with passion. People with that kind of uh, treatment or the kind of spirit that will spur you on. Because why? You want to win the game. In order to win the game, you've got to win the challenges. You've got to be ahead. You've got to be faster than the next player. And so that is the challenge, that drives the passion in you. And you just go on and just chase after the ball. And that the Tamo Kala spirit, I've got to win this game no matter
Mm.
what. Even if it kills the next person, I just want to win this game. But of course, we were not that bad. But still, the spirit is there, and that really made us, want to just win and win all the time.
Yeah. I mean, we of course know about the 70s, the Kalang Raw generation, and then the 90s, the Dream Team. In the 1950s and 1960s, when you were playing, was Singapore really a football mad country?
Oh, more than that. In fact, in 19, we just recently, we had an event to honor the Singapore team of 1966.
Oh.
Why? This was the team that went on to come in fourth in the Asian Games.
Mm.
Because I mean, we've won the Malaysia Cup many a times, and we've also done well at the Sea Games level, uh, and we've done pretty well at the international level. But the time that we did our best was in 1966 when we came in fourth in the Asian Games, and we're
Oh.
talking about the highest level of competition, the Asian Games. And there are about 20 to 25 countries taking part, and they're all at at
Mm.
the best performance ever. Singapore ended up winning the group stage. We went on to the next round, and that's where we met Vietnam, and we beat Vietnam 5-1. All right. Now, Vietnam is a very strong side. They got at least two players who are really in a class of their own. They represented the Asian All Stars. But yet that day, we beat them 5-1 with Kwa Kim Lai, Kim Song's elder brother,
Mm.
scoring 3 goals. And then 2 other goals were scored by Matthew and one other player, making it 5-1 in all. Then we went on to the semi-finals, and I beg your pardon, we went to the quarterfinals, and that's where we meet Thailand, another very strong side. Not easy to beat Thailand, and more so on their home ground. So what happened was we beat Thailand 2-1. with
Wow.
Majid Arif. He is a brilliant player. There's no other player that can match the magic of Majid Arif. And the other goal scorer was Kwa Kim Sui, the captain of the side. He's the eldest of the Kwa brothers who represented Singapore during that period. So that really was the best ever Singapore side.
Ah, so this was just a year before you got promoted to the national side, isn't it?
That's right. That's right.
Ah, who was the coach at this time?
Choo Seng Quee.
Ah, Uncle
But of
Chu.
course, he wasn't available for the Siap Games,
Right.
I mean the Asian game. So there was another gentleman by the name of Yap Boon Chuan. He was a PE specialist from the Ministry of Education. And so he was appointed in place of Chu Seng Kui. But Chu Seng Kui was the man who developed all these players from very young. He was famous for coaching all these young boys near his house. He lives at Farrer Park. So he will get the boys together. I was one of them, and we used to turn up every Sunday morning at Farrer Park for Senqui's specialized training. You know, I'll be totally shagged after that, but you certainly, you certainly learn. You learn a lot from the old man we call Uncle Chu. So that's
Right.
how I came up.
Yeah, I mean, so much has been written about him, and there's so much
Yes.
reverence for him. From your interactions with him, training under him, especially, what was his, uh, his gift as a coach?
Or he's got a way of, working you up and making sure that even if, it's your last drop of blood, that you will get up and go one more time. That's the kind of man he is. He believes in installing in you semangat macam api. You know what it means?
No.
That means fire, spirit on fire. That's Uncle Chu. I mean, he's a really wonderful motivator.
Uh,
No two ways. Nobody can match the old man.
who was the captain in this team?
Depends on what year.
Okay.
If it's in '66, it was Kwa Kim Sui. Before that, if my memory serves me right, it may not. But for the youth team, I was the captain in '67, and then we had one of the players by the name of Muhammad Ali Ahmad. He was in 19. I must tell you something about Muhammad Ali Ahmad. He just passed away recently, just last month. He just passed away. He was a brilliant winger who became a fullback and ended up as sweeper.
Mm.
And in 1972, uh, he went to South Korea to take part in a tournament, and he ended up as the player of the whole tournament. That means he was the most outstanding player. And imagine from Singapore doing that. And that was the very same year that R. Krishnan, Roy Krishnan, was voted as the fastest winger in Asia. That was the glory that these boys brought back to Singapore. And then, of course, over the years, we changed. And in 1970, which was my last tournament for Singapore, there was a player who came in. He was a reserve, but he came in because my next teammate was injured, and so he was brought in to replace my teammate. He is Samad Alapiche.
Mm.
He made his debut in Indonesia, and then, of course, later he went on to be captain of Singapore from the '70s right through into the '80s.
I see. I see.
But I think one of the most, yeah, I forgot to mention, one of the most very, very popular captain was Lee Kok Seng. And this is during the early 60s. Uh, he was a police officer,
Mm.
ASP Lee Kok Seng, and he was captain of the Singapore side. He was a brilliant captain, he was a brilliant leader.
In those days, the 50s to the maybe early 70s, were the players amateurs or were they semi-pro?
Oh, all amateurs, all
Amateurs.
amateurs. Yep,
Ah.
no professionals. There was one time in I think the early 60s when two players, in fact, you see, Uncle Choo Quee was invited by Tunku Abdul Rahman to be the national coach of Malaya.
Mm.
That was a time when Malaya or Malaysia was known as Malaya. So when he wanted particularly two players from Singapore to go over to Malaya and play for them. They were Majid, as I said, he's a mercurial player, wonderful. Uh, Majid Arif and Mahat Ambu. So he got these two players to go over to Malaysia, or should I say Malaya, to play football for Perak. And when they were there playing for Perak, they qualified to play for the country. And so Majid and Mahat were called upon by Choo Seng Quee to play for Malaya. They had a very strong side at that time with the inclusion of Majid and Mahat. And then, of course, they had their own stars like Abdul Ghani
Mm.
and all these players, Stanley Gabriel, Govinda Raju. Amazing. Those were the days. So there you have it. We had stars that come and go this way, and not a single one of them, except for pocket money,
Ah.
like say maybe $10 per training session. Like in Singapore, during my time, you won't believe this. We had $5 and we were quite happy. Hey, $5, not bad. $5 per training session and $10 a game, right? But today, hey, you are talking big money, with all these players, and they are professionals. Those days, no professional footballers at all.
Could you talk about the positions you played? I think you've changed some positions throughout your career, isn't it?
Yes, you're talking about football?
Yes, yes. Sorry.
Okay. I started as a left fullback when I was in school. I started as a left fullback, and I couldn't kick the ball with my left leg to save myself. But you know why? I looked at the team, I sized up the team, and I said, okay, I there I don't stand a chance. Here I don't stand a chance. I think that the weakest position would be left back. Okay. So I train my left leg. That's the kind of player or that's the kind of person I am. So train myself into that position where I got hold of that position. They put me as a left fullback because why they didn't have a proper left fullback. And I made that position my own. So as we went along, when I left school, when I went for trials, when I went for trials in the Singapore youth team to prepare for the Burnley Cup tournament, uh, I was playing at left fullback during the trials. Then at the end of the trials, it's a 2-day trial at Jalan Besar Stadium. The, the the chap who was in charge of training and what have you and all that. In fact, he was Mr. George Supaya. He was also the coach of the youth team. So he asked me, he says, Brian, he says, can you play right fullback? I said, yeah. In fact, I'm a right-legged player. I'm not a left-legged player. He said, yeah, but you convinced me that you can play left back. And so I thought that you were a left legger. So he said, the reason I'm asking you this is because the captain of the team is Matthew Chin, and he is a left legger. So, in other words, if I put you there, I can't put Matthew with you. You know, one of you will have to go. So so he said, "Can you play right back?" I said, "Of course, Mr. Supaya." He said, "Okay, you're in." And so I went on to be the right full back. And then when I was picked to play for the Malaysian youth team, I was playing at right full back, you know. And again, the captain was Suto Kimpo from Penang. So he, being the captain, was the right fullback of the Malaysian youth team. And so this time it was Peter Velopan. He says, "Brian, I'm in a quandary now. Can you play right half, you know, midfield, right half?" I said, "Sure, can." I was daring enough to attempt whatever position you put me in, you see. I'm willing to try. So I did. So I played at right half for Malaysian youth. I played at right back for the Singapore youth team and so on. And then in '66, I remember clearly, Rahim Omar was the coach. Now, he is a legendary player, Rahim Omar. He was the coach of the 1966 Asian youth team. And he had one player who was playing for his club, playing at right full back. So there you are, clash again. This player is also a very good right full back. But our weakest spot was centre back. So he said, "Can you play centre back?" I suppose I can, but he taught me, you know, the finer points of positional play as a last man. You're the last man. So I benefited from that. And then after that, the centre back position became mine regular.
So you are very versatile.
I should say so because I can fit in. If you ask me to play on the, you know, up front, in fact, there was one game where we were short of strikers, and I played on the left wing.
So
But it was fun. It was fun.
right,
It
right.
was fun.
This
To test yourself, you know.
did you then, have like an idol, right? A player that you model yourself upon in that sense?
Oh, several,
Ah,
several. Like I said, this Majid Arif, he was one of them. He's got brilliant ball skills. Really, he was offered to play in an English team,
ah,
you know, in the UK. But of course, you know, he's used to all the local delights, like you know, nasi biryani or you know, mie rebus or whatever it is. But he said, "But how if I go to England? How? How? Dia makan boleh tak? Tak boleh makan. Tak boleh makan kentang semua." So he's typical Malay. So very happy with the local conditions, but not overseas. And then we had other players who also did well. I must mention Wilfred Skinner, voted as one of Singapore's greatest goalkeeper. And he's a double international, yeah? He's a double international because he played football for Singapore and he was also Singapore's hockey centre half.
oh,
He was playing hockey for Singapore as well. And he was a police officer. He was a wonderful goalkeeper. He's a big guy, very strong.
ah.
So he was one of the outstanding stars of the Singapore side those days, yeah. And then, of course, as far as players overseas are concerned, for me, there was one player called Stanley Matthews. I don't know whether you have heard of that
Sounds
name.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he was king of the dribble. You know, wonderful player. He's you know his skills are such like you know like the ball is stuck to his foot. That's how good he was. Wonderful, really. Those who never had a chance to see Stanley Matthews, I just feel sorry for you. You missed something really outstanding. But of course, there are other players. I have met some of these players,
Mm.
like the captain of the England 1966 World Cup winning team. That's Bobby Moore. I met him in Singapore when he dropped over in Singapore. I met him. And also the others like Bobby Charlton, who used to play for Manchester United. And then there was Jeff Hurst. He was the scorer of the hat trick against Germany in the World Cup final in '66. And Pat Jennings and Gordon Banks, one of the most outstanding goalkeepers ever. But of course, talking about that, I have met many of these stars in the course of my work.
Mm.
One of them is the greatest player of all. Guess who?
Must be Pele, eh?
Yes, you got it. You got it. I met Pele here in Singapore. He came here on a promotional trip, and the sponsors, called RTS. I keep mixing between MediaCorp, SBC, and RTS. RTS is Radio Television Singapore. Those were the early days. And so they call RTS and say, hey, how would you like to interview Pele? Then they said, yeah. So the first thing they did was call me, They said, hey, Brian, we are arranging an interview with Pele. I jumped out of my seat. I said, wow. So where? Shangri-La Hotel at the back, in the garden. Go and meet him and interview him. Take your time and all that. So which I did. And I got some photographs which I left with you.
Yeah.
So that's one. And and so I've met a lot of well-known personalities, especially in sports and also in entertainment.
Mm. I just want to ask you about Wilfred Skinner, right?
Yes.
He's was he British?
No, he's Eurasian.
Ah, okay.
He's a Eurasian guy. Yeah, but big fella. I mean, the thing is, don't get involved with him. One thing about Wilfred, if there's any fisticuffs, yeah. I was playing for the police team, and police, of course, was represented by Wilfred Skinner and a few of these well-known players. And there was one time when I got involved in one of the players, clash.
Mm.
We clashed, and he knocked me down. What Wilfred Skinner did, and he's a huge guy, all right, mighty big fella. He came after that guy, caught him by the neck, and punched him on the face, which is unbecoming of a police officer. But that's the kind of protection you get when you have Wilfred Skinner as your teammate.
Amazing stories. What about training? Did you like training?
No, nobody likes training. But of course, you have to be dedicated. You've got to be dedicated to the task. Otherwise, you will never improve. Like the worst training that I had was getting up early in the morning and going over to Farrer Park at 7 a.m. to report to Uncle Choo Quee for training. Can you imagine? He takes the ball, soaks it in water overnight, brings it out to Farrer Park with a field. There are several fields, right? Goes to one of the fields, and he will take all the balls and put it in the middle of the field. And your task is to kick the ball, hit it with all your might. It must reach the goal. It must reach the goal, if possible, score. If you can't score, but at least you must reach the goal, right? Now, after the morning's training, let me tell you, when you go back, your ankle will be swollen because it's heavy, soaked with water and all that, and then you having to drive the ball from midway. But then when you get into the playing field in the evening, if you've got a match and you're playing, When you kick that ball, if the goalkeeper catches it, my goodness gracious me, don't think twice. You will definitely let it in. That's the reward of training. You got to keep at it, keep at it, keep at it, and you improve all the time.